Tov. Today's daf yomi is Sanhedrin daf Gimel, Sanhedrin 3. And today's daf yomi is dedicated for Shemir for the Chayalim, Ratzah for the Shvuyim, and Yeshua for Am Yisrael and the Tzara. So the daf yomi tells us the Mishnah back at the beginning of Sanhedrin had said, Dini Mamanos Bishlosha, Gezelos v'Chavalos Bishlosha. Monetary laws are adjudicated with a court of 3. In Gezelos v'Chavalos, robbery and torts and damages are also a 3. The Gemara asked the question at the beginning of the Gemara, but Dini Mamanos is Gezelos v'Chavalos. So why does it say Dini Mamanos and then Gezelos v'Chavalos? So Rabbi Avo's answer to this question was, what are that? The Mishnah is Mahin. What are these Dini Mamanos? They are Gezelos v'Chavalos. But the problem with that is that it's saying, the Gemara is saying, Dini Mamanos are Gezelos v'Chavalos. What is it excluding? And the Gemara said, well, it's excluding Hodos Avos, loans and admissions. Those are not considered Dini Mamanos. To mean what? What's that halacha? Meaning that the that regular loans don't require 3 experts, but Gezelos v'Chavalos require 3 experts. In that context, meaning to say, the Gemara says, why don't they require 3 experts? Isn't the source for the idea that you require experts also the same source for the idea that you require 3? It comes from the pasuk, Ada Elohim Yavod Dvar Shnehem. So it says the word Elohim 3 times. So if that's the case, why do you not require 3 experts by Odos Valvos? The Gemara explains, because really you should require 3 experts by Odos Valvos, but we're worried if you have to get Mumchen, then it'll be too hard and nobody's going to lend money. And then the door will be shut in front of the borrowers. So the Gemara says on the top of Gimel Amud Aleph, 3 lines from the top, Al Mayat, if that's the case, if we're really saying that the people who are not experts are able to adjudicate cases of Odos Valvos, if that's the case, this is going to be a discussion which we get to on 32a. If these non-experts make mistakes when they're the judges, they shouldn't have to pay because they have the permission of the court, of the rabbis, to be the judges. Gemara says no. If they're not going to pay, no, then you're really going to discourage loans because you're going to say that you can go to a judge and if the judge makes a mistake, he doesn't have to pay. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, so if that's the case that our Mishnah is saying that Hodos, that Dine Mamanos is, when it refers to 3, if that's the case, Hodos Avos also need 3, but that not only that, but a Hediotos, non-Mumchan are expert. Why does Rabbi Avo say that our Mishnah says Dine Mamanos? What are they? We should have just interpreted to say Dine Mamanos is 3. That's Hodos Valvos, that they're not experts. And Gezelos v'Chavos are 3 experts. That's what our Mishnah is saying, not Mahin Ketani, but Tarati Ketani. Our Mishnah is teaching us 2 separate laws. Dine Mamanos b'Shlosha Hediotos. Dine Mamanos is 3 regular people, and Gezelos v'Chavos Shlosha Mimchan. And furthermore, Va'od, Shlosha Lamali. What does our Mishnah have to say? Dine Mamanos is 3, Gezelos v'Chavos is 3. It could just say Dine Mamanos, Gezelos v'Chavos are 3. And therefore, Rava says, right, what Rabbi Avo is really saying, or Rava is giving his own answer, but he's saying, Tarati Ketani, Mishum Rabbi Chanina. He said, yeah, our Mishnah is not a Mahin Ketani. It's not what are Dine Mamanos, Gezelos v'Chavos. Our Mishnah is teaching us 2 laws. Dine Mamanos, i.e., Hodos, Valvos, are 3 regular people, and Gezelos v'Chavos are 3 experts. Like Rabbi Chanina said, that really you should have 3 experts for Hodos, Valvos, but we're worried that it will discourage loans. Ravacha Brei Ravika says a different explanation. He said, really, biblically speaking, one judge is enough. Presumably only by Odos Valvos. It's going to be a dispute amongst the Rishonim. But that's how Rashi says. But really, biblically speaking, one judge is enough. Shenemar, as it says, but tzedek tishbot amisecha, you judge them with justice, and it's tzedek tishbot, you judge 1. But El Mishum Yoshvei Kronos, but the reason why do we need 3? Because we're concerned about Rashi as a version Gezer, a decree, because of Yoshvei Kronos. There are going to be these people who are just sitting in the corners. They're not experts, and they're going to mess up. So therefore, we make it be 3 judges. So the Gemara says, well, how's that solving anything by having 3 judges if they're all going to be incompetent? So the Gemara says, if you have 3, at least one of them will know the law. Well, the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, if the Yoshvei Kronos are put in, the Hedjotos are put in to judge, if that's the case, if they're judging with permission, they shouldn't have to pay if they make a mistake. Gemara says, no. If we say they don't have to pay, then we're going to have too many people who are incompetent judging because they're going to say there's no consequences. Gemara asks the question, what's the distinction between Rava, who says that really, biblically speaking, you have 3 judges who are required, but we allow them to be 3 regular people, and Rav Ravika says, really, biblically speaking, you need 1, but we require 3. What's the distinction? They argue about what the distinction between them is the position of Shmuel. Who Shmuel taught, let's say there are 2 people who judge a case. Shmuel says it's technically speaking a valid decision, but they're called an arrogant court because they ignored the takana of the Chachamim. Let's say you're supposed to have 3. So according to Rava, it's like the Shmuel, Rava, who says that biblically speaking, you need 3 experts. We just allow them to be regular people. He doesn't agree with Shmuel. He says even if it's 2, it's not going to be acceptable because you have to have 3. Whereas Rav Ravika is like the Shmuel. He agrees with Shmuel because he says really biblically speaking, you only need 1. We just have 3 out of a takana of Yoshei Kronos, but 2 would be okay. But it's called a Bezdin Chatzuf. Bezdin Chatzuf is an arrogant court. So the Gemara now says, why does our Mishnah say Nezek, V'chatzi Nezek, Tashlumi Keifel, Tashlumi Arba Chamisha have to go for a court of 3? Nezek is damages. Now that's one of the, if you damage somebody else, then you have to pay 5 types of damages. And one of these damages are Nezek, Tzari, Poshavas, Poshas, damages, pain, medicine, lost wages, and humiliation. But those are all forms of chavolos. They're all torts. So nezek, I know chavolos. Nezek is an example of the chavolos. So why does it say gzelos chavolos 3 and then nezek was 3? It's the exact same thing. Nezek is a subcategory of chavolos. Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Mishum dekabaylo misnei chatzi nezek, because the Mishnah also wants to say half damages is also 3. Half damages is a short time. So since it wants to talk about a ox that gores for the first time, you pay half damages. So therefore, it also lists damages as well. So therefore, stylistically. Chatzi nezek. That's what we're going to say. So the Gemara says, and therefore, Tananami nezek shalom. Chatzi nezek nami hainu chavalos. The Gemara asks a different question. That's Shia's question. The Gemara says, well, half damage is also chavalos. If it says chavalos are 3, so chatzi nezek is also 3. So the Gemara says, wait. Tana mamona v'katani kinasa. So no, there's a dispute in Baba Kama. How do we view the half damages? Do we view it as compensatory, which is mamona, and really you should pay full damages, but we are go easy on you and only pay you half? Or do we say really you're exempt from having to pay anything if your ox has never gored before, and we penalize you, and it's a kanas. So if we say it's a kanas, then it's a form of chavala. But if we're saying it's mamona, then if that's the case, it's not a type of chavalos. So the Gemara says, so why is it being listed here? So the Gemara says, Tani mamona v'katani kanasa. And it makes sense that it wants to list half damages because it's a kanas. Fine, then it's a form of a chavala. But according to the one who says, that half damages is compensatory, then if that's the case, why did I have to list half damages under these circumstances? So therefore, Gemara says, hold on one second. Meaning to say, I explained a little wrong, that the Tana says memona, which is general chavalos, and then a list of time of, and then a kanasa, and the half damages are kanas. But if we say that half damages is also memona, then why does it have to list the half damages once we listed the chavalos? So therefore, the Gemara says, Well, so we say no. Since the Tana wants to list Tashlumi Kefil, that's where you pay double if there's a Geneva, or Tashlumi Arba v'Chamisha, or paying 4 or 5 times the amount if you slaughter or sell a sheep or an ox, which is Mamon Shein Mashtalim Barosh, which is money that is not where you don't just pay the principal, you pay either more or less. Dani Nami Chati Nezek, the Mamon Shein Mashtalim Barosh. It's a different category of money that's also not the exact principal. And since stylistically we're listing half damages, and therefore we also list Tani Nami Nezek, we also list damages. Now the Gemara goes back to the fundamental question. How do you know you need 3 judges by Dine Mamanos? So they ask the Gemara on the top of Gimel and Beis Shloshah Minon. How do we know we need 3 judges by Dine Mamanos? In Tan Rabbana, because the pasuk says, with respect to the laws of Shomrim, in the morning, Boker Tov, on top of Gimel and Beis, the Gemara is asking the question: how do you know that you need 3 judges? In Tan Rabbana, Nikra Valabayas Elohim. It says in the Brisa that in the case where a person says, you took my pikadon, you took my deposit, this is by the laws of Shomrim, that the Balabayas goes to Elohim. Normally in the Torah, Elohim means a word for God, but here Elohim means a judge. So you go to the judge, that's one verse. Ada Elohim Yavot Var Shneim. Then there's another time Elohim appears where it says both of them shall come to the court. That's in the very next pasuk. And then in that same pasuk, it says, Asher Yarshion Elohim. In that same pasuk, it says, the one who the court finds responsible. Areikan Shlosha. So therefore, there are 3 references to the word judge, Elohim. And so that's why you need 3 judges. That's the position of Rabbi Yoshaya, whereas Rabbi Yonasan says, Rishon Tchilo Nemar Ve'ein Dorshan Tchilos. The first time it appears, V'nikra Balabayas Elo Elohim. That is what's called the first time it appears, and we don't expound the first time it appears because there we need it to teach us the main idea that you need an expert. What's an expert? Rashi says this is somebody who's ordained ish min pi ish, from an unbroken chain of tradition going back to Moses. So therefore, Rishon Tchilo Nemar, the first time Elohim appears, is tells you need experts. Ein Dorshan Tchilos. We don't expound the experts. We don't expound the first verse. El Ad Elohim Yavot Var Shneim Harei Kan Echad. Asher Yarshion Elohim Harei Kan Shnayim. Vein Beis Shakal Mosif Elohim Od Echad. So Rabbi Yonasan says we have 2 verses that say Elohim, and since you can't have an equal court, therefore we have 3 judges total. So they both agree that there's 3 judges, but Rabbi Yoshaya says it's 3 times in the pasuk, and Rabbi Yonasan says 2 from the psukim, and 1 because you can't have an even court. So practically speaking, they seem to be agreeing. So in my kamiflagi, so the Gemara wants to know, well, why are they arguing? What's the nature of their arguing? So the Gemara says, "B'dorshan chilos kamiflagi," that they're arguing about whether or not, if there's a word that appears in the verses, whether the first time it appears, you could also expound it to teach a law, or whether we assume that it's meant to teach us something else. Rabbi Yoshai, that's what they're arguing about. The Marasavar Dorshan Chilos, that Rabbi Yoshaya says that we can also expound the first time it appears, and that's to teach us 3 judges. Marasavar Ein Dorshan Chilos, or as Rabbi Yonasan says we can. So do we want to say that that's their argument, the Gemara said, and that's why it's important to know this? Yeah? 23. We're going to get to the Gemara. We're going to say, what are you talking about? We have this question there. The Gemara is about to connect it. The Gemara says, no. Kuli Alma, everybody's in the position that Ein Dorshan Chilos. Even Rabbi Yoshaya says we really don't expound the first time it appears. And Rabbi Yoshaya says, even though generally speaking we don't expound the first time it appears, this case we do. Could have just said you go to the shofet, to the judge. But from the fact, my Elohim, Shema Min Minyana. So since it says Elohim, that means it's an unusual word for it to be used. So therefore, it means that we're supposed to count even the first one. But in general, Rabbi Yoshai would say Ein Dorshan Chilos. Rabbi Yonasan says Lishna da Alma Naka. Rabbi Yonasan says no. He says we don't we're not going to expound that it says Elohim instead of Shofet, because this is the way people say. People talk about the judge as Elohim. Whoever has a judgment, you should go for an expert court and not for a regular judge. And the word Elohim implies an expert, and Shofet would imply like a regular run-of-the-mill judge. So therefore, Rabbi Yonasan says they adopted the language that people typically use. Rabbi Yoshaya, but now we go to a fundamental question. Rabbi Yoshaya says we have to expound all three. That means he says two would not be enough. But why? Why can't he say you have two, and then it's an equal court, and then you push it to three? That's what Rabbi Yonasan says. So does this mean that Rabbi Yoshaya says we don't assume that there's a problem with an even court? Rabbi Yoshaya Leisley Bezdin noted, doesn't Rabbi Yoshaya agree with the idea that you have to have a majority ruling in the court? Isn't that what we said in the Mishnah also? That's kind of like what Jeff was asking. Don't you need to have a court that has a majority or capable of majority? So several Rabbi Yehuda the Amar, no, so it must be. This was what Bill asked yesterday. Now Rabbi Yoshaya is of the position that maybe you don't need, that maybe there's not a problem with an even court. Because why? Because he holds like Rabbi Yehuda, who says Shivim, says that there could be 70 judges in the Sanhedrin, which means the Tanan Sanhedrin Gedol Iso Shal Shivim, the Echad Rabbi Yehuda says Shivim. So the Mishnah says, the Tanakama says Sanhedrin is 71, but Rabbi Yehuda says 70. Hold on one second. I just want to stop for a second. Tosfos says, wait one second. Rabbi Yehuda in the Gemara Sukkah says that there were 71 golden chairs in Alexandria, corresponding to the 71 judges of the Sanhedrin. So there, Rabbi Yehuda says 71, and here we say 70. So what's the difference? There's a problem within Rabbi Yehuda's position. Now, those who says even Rabbi Yehuda, when he says 71, he meant 70 plus Moshe Rabbeinu. And so he still says, in general, even the position that says 70 says there were 70, plus there was the big head of everybody, the Gadol Ador, the Rosh Yeshiva, who everybody recognized was the head of the whole Sanhedrin, who was above there. So they both really say 71. The Mishnah says 71. Rabbi Yehuda says 70. And Rabbi Yehuda in Sukkah says 71. So the Tosfos says, even Rabbi Yehuda who says 70 really means 71. Yeah, they're going to say that. I mean, they're going to, I don't know, basically they're going to talk around it now. They're basically saying it. So he holds like Rabbi Yehuda. First, we'll switch to the two dots, and if you still think it's an issue, we could go into it. So the Gemara says, so we see from here that Rabbi Yehuda, so Rabbi Yoshaya must hold like Rabbi Yehuda, who says you can have an even court. The Gemara says, but wait, Amar the Shamas like Rabbi Yehuda with Sanhedrin Gadol that's Sivi Kra. Bishar Beidina Mi Shamas like, okay, maybe Rabbi Yehuda says you can have an even court by a Sanhedrin. There's a pasuk, Esli Shivamish, gather 70 men. But by a court of 23, whereas Jeff was pointing out, we said you can't do it. And by a court of 3, why would we don't know that Rabbi Yehuda holds that? If you want to say Rabbi Yehuda in Taka does say by even a court of 20 that he holds that it could be an even number. But Vatanan, didn't we learn in the Mishnah? This is what he was. Smicha zekenim ba'arifa segla b'shlosha divrei Rabbi Shimon, that smicha of the elders and breaking of the heifer's neck, that you need a court of 3. Rabbi Yehuda says b'chamisha. Ma'amrina my time with Rabbi Yehuda, and we said in the explanation of Rabbi Yehuda, why does he require 5? Because with some kushnayim ziknei shtayim and ein bezin shakom musifin le'on echad areikan chamisha. He says you get it to 5 because you can't have an even court. So you see, Rabbi Yehuda himself says that he says you can't have an even court. It's just by Sanhedrin it says you could be even. So Rabbi Yoshaya, who is he holding like? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yoshaya difa min Rabbi Yehuda. Yeah, Rabbi Yoshaya says not exactly like Rabbi Yehuda. His position is even more radical. Rabbi Yehuda is Sanhedrin Gadol the way. Rabbi Yehuda says you don't need it. It's not a problem to have an even court by a Sanhedrin. But by all other rulings, he says you can't have an even court. Whereas Rabbi Yoshaya, Rabbi Yoshaya, by all other courts, he also says that you can that there's no problem having an even court. So now we get to the question that Jeff was asking, but about the fact that we said by a court of 23, You said you need achiralim lahatos, that you need to have a majority. You need to be capable of a majority. So my avale mukim we bedina nefasha. So bedina mamasol. He says, yeah, that court of 23. That's the case where you need a majority. If it's a capital case, but not by a monetary case, there you can have an even court. The Gemara says, well, how did Tanam? What about the fact that we're going to get to the Mishnah in chapter 3? It says, Shnayim omer mzakai, echad omer chayev zakai, Shnayim omer chayev, echad omer mzakai chayev. Name it the Rabbi Yoshaya. So now the Gemara says, okay, this is a little bit of a strange position. He says, we learned in the Mishnah that if two judges say that the person is innocent, and one judge says he's guilty, he's innocent. Shnayim omer chayev, two say he's guilty, echad omer zakai, and one says he's innocent. Chayev, name of the local Rabbi Yoshaya. Well, should we say this is not like Rabbi Yoshaya? Because according to Rabbi Yoshaya, we need, since Rabbi Yoshaya says all three judges are learned out from the Pesukim and not from the law of the majority, therefore we need to have all three making a ruling for innocence or all three making a ruling for guilty. And you can't make a final ruling with just two. So the Gemara says, no, that's not the conclusion we should be getting. I feel with him Rabbi Yoshaya, Ma'aseh b'kol v'chomer midin nefashos, ma'adin nefashos chamiri amar Rahman avdil basaruka. The Imam also calls it. He says, no, it doesn't mean you need three to all rule the same way. You could follow the majority, just like we follow the majority by Dine Nefashos. Also, by monetary cases, we follow the majority. So not that we need all three judges to rule one way. So then the Gemara says, so we've seen the position of Rabbi Avo. We've seen now the position of the Brisa here. It says, how do you get to three? It's based upon the fact that it says Elohim three times. And Rabbi Yoshaya says Elohim three times. Rabbi Yonasan says Elohim twice, plus third time you can't have an even court. The Gemara introduces another position. Tana Rabbanan Dini Mamanos B'Shlosha, Rabbi Omer B'Chamisha. So the position of the Tanakama here is that Dini Mamanos is with three, whereas Rabbi says it is with five. Shocking position. Rabbi says you need five to discuss it. Like this position we just rejected from Rabbi Yoshaya. You need five to discuss it so you can have three ruling in a specific way, at least three ruling. So he says, I don't understand. If we're three, can we have a Gemara din with two ruling one way? That's the position we ultimately said Rabbi Yoshaya agrees to. So the Gemara concludes, so no, why does Rabbi say you need five? Because he says you need a conclusion of three. And when you give a ruling, you need three who all say either innocent or guilty. So the Gemara says, so we see from here that Rabbi's of the position that when it says Elohim three times, it means we need three to rule that way. So this is not like we just said about Rabbi Yoshaya. So Megadif bar Rabbi Avo was so upset with this position. So Megadif, he was he rejected it completely, or like he very upset with it. So he says, according to Rabbi, do you want to say Sanhedrin Gadol Tzucha Mea Barbaim? I want to say, according to Rabbi, that the Sanhedrin should require 141, so you should have 71 concluding one way. And the smaller court should have 45. It's an impossibility because we have the pasuk that says, you need 70. That's it. You don't need 141. So you need 23 from the time you gather one. You don't need 45. You only need 3 when you gather. What's the problem? What? You need 141. You need to have 71 going. 71 to 70. We had the discussion in the Sanhedrin. Is Sanhedrin 70 or 71? So the Gemara says, Ella, says Rabbi Avo, that's not the reason of Rabbi. The reason of Rabbi is not that you need 5, is not because you need 3 to rule in a specific way. That's not the reason. That's not the reason. Ella, Hainu time of the Rabbi. What's the reasoning for Rabbi? It says, this is another good one. Asher Yachshun Elohim. It says It says, excuse me, it says, Asher Yarshiun Elohim, whoever the court will find liable, that's Trey. The word Yarshiun refers to two. It's in the plural. So that refers to two judges. And Nemer Elohim Lamata. So it says Asher Yarshiun Elohim, that's the end of the pasuk. The Nemer Elohim Lamala. And at the beginning, in the earlier pasuk, it says, hold on one second. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. Okay. And earlier in that pasuk, it says also Elohim. So that pasuk, the word Elohim appears twice. So each one is referring to two judges. And the aim bezin shakel mosifin olim od echad arei kan chamisha. And so Rebbe says, since you can't have an even court, you get to five judges. So that's what Rebbe says five. And then the Gemara says, the Rabbanon and the Rabbanon who say you need three, they say, no, even though we read it as Asher Yarshiun in the plural, but it's actually written in the singular. Asher Yarshion Kisiv. It's written in the singular. And so therefore, since it's written in the singular, we're going to view it as one judge and not two. And so therefore, we don't learn from here that you need two. So now, there's sometimes, this is bringing us into the basic discussion of aim with mikra or aim with misora. This is a machokes that appears also in Makos, and basically there's sometimes a distinction in the Torah between the words that the way they're written in the Torah, that's called the Masorah, and the way we read them, which is called the Mikra. And so in this case, Yarshiun is read. If you say we follow the way it's read, that's Yesh Eim Mikra, then we would read it as two. That's what Rebbe would say. And if you follow the way it's written, that's the way Yesh Eim Mesoret, and that's the way the Rabbanon are doing it. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rebbe. So Rebbe here is saying, we follow the way it is read, Yesh Eim Mikra. So the Gemara says here, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Rabbi Yossi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rebbe, Rabbi Yehuda ben Roetz, Ubei Shammai, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Akiva, Kul Svirlu Yesh Eim Mikra. They're all of the position that when there's two ways to read the Torah, basically when we can follow either the way it's read or the way it's written, what we darshan is that the main drasha we follow after is not the way it's written, but the way it's read. The Gemara says, and the Gemara basically lists these Tanoim, Rabbi Yehuda, Ben Roetz, Beis Shammai, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Akiva, five different authorities who all say Yesh Eim Mikra. Rabbi Hadam and Rabbi said we follow the plural, Yarshiyun, where the Rabbanan say we follow the way it's written, which is the Yarshiyon. Okay, hold on. This is the daf. We're going to do this at 8, but we could keep going now. So we'll be chazering a little bit at 8. We could go on for a little.